Welcome to Government Contractor Chat. I am Lindsay Riegelsberger, Director of Operations and Business Development for Streamline Government Contracts. Streamline helps small to mid-sized government contractors who seek experienced, effective support with contract management that reduces risk, increases profits, and enhances reputations. We do this by negotiating teaming agreements, subcontracts, preparing estimates of completion when necessary, and speaking to contracting officers in their own language. We are the proud organizers of Government Contractor Chat, and we thank you for joining us today. I'm going to introduce our guest speakers now. Kim Koster, VP of GovCon Strategy, is a respected voice in government contracting with more than 35 years of experience advising project-based organizations on how to operate smarter, grow sustainably, and compete more effectively. Her work centers on project accounting, delivery excellence, and using data to drive better decisions. She has held senior leadership roles at Deltek, ATK, Raytheon Missile Systems, and JAVELIN Joint Ventures, bringing a rare blend of practitioner insights and strategic perspective. As co-author of the annual Gauge Report, Kim helps shape industry conversations through benchmarking and research that guide executives on what's working, what's changing, and where to focus next. We are also joined by Kean Reilly, Senior Manager in CohnReznick's Government Contracting Advisory Practice, where he advises clients on managing and utilizing government funding and leads analysis of costs incurred and invoiced on government projects. He evaluates performance on government awards to recommend improvements in indirect rate development, business systems, and internal controls, project management, reporting, and proposal preparation in alignment with FAR, PASS, and uniform guidance to CFR 200. With more than 15 years of experience across the Defense Contract Audit Agency, Inspector General offices, and industry roles, Kean brings a deep understanding of government contracting, processes, procedures, and best practices. Please join me in welcoming Kim Koster and Kean Reilly.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I appreciate it. This is Christine and I, and Christine Williamson, she's from CohnReznick. We've been doing this Gauge Report now for 9 years. And boy, really, it has evolved so much over the years, and we've had so much fun doing it. We started working on our 10th anniversary edition, and it's going to be the best of the Gauge. That should be released by the end of May. And we're really looking forward today. Kean and I have never presented together, so we're gonna find our space here together.
We're gonna crush it.
That's exactly right. And we can't wait to share the insights we gleaned from the 2025 report. And Kean's probably going to talk a little bit about some of the early information that we've gotten out of 2026. If you're not familiar with Unanet, just want to make sure you know who we are. We've spent over 34 years focused on delivering value for project-based businesses. We have a modern project-based platform that enables GovCons to win new business, drive growth, and be profitable. So our tools really do fuel the entire project lifecycle. We do serve more than 4,000 total customers, and over half of those are GovCons. All right, Kean.
All right, so CohnReznick's Global Consulting Solutions, the GovCon advisory practice where I sit and advise clients. We provide guidance through from the whole entire proposal life cycle, right, all the way through contract closeout and everywhere in between. Anytime there's compliance issues, policy procedures updates, any type of indirect rates, or any of those type of functions that would be needed on a government contract, that's kind of where we come in and help clients out and get them over those difficult situations, or the prospective business strategy side of it, and understanding what it looks like from a business structure perspective for indirect rates. That's kind of what we help in with. So that's kind of just a quick overview. And then also we blend in a lot of the other services CohnReznick provides through cyber, the attacks, the insurance services, and everywhere else in between. So we kind of have a full range of services to provide to any client on that.
All right, well, thank you, Kean. So I am going to start off by talking a little bit about the Gauge. It is an industry benchmarking study in the GovCon marketplace. In 2025, we had over 1,200 contributors across GovCons really of all shapes and sizes. We had the survey open between January 2025 and March 2025. And so we did capture a big part of that transition in the results. And you'll see a lot of that inside the actual book. So I hope you'll go off and download that. You can get it from the CohnReznick website or from the Unanet website. And we actually had a Doge section in that would be very helpful because this was definitely a very unique time in GovCon. Of all the years I've worked, I've never seen it quite so volatile.
Yep.
I will tell you that the GAGE is an acronym. Christine and I could not be outdone by government contracting overall, so we had to make up our own. So it stands for Government Contract Compliance, Accounting, Utilization, Growth, and Efficiency. These chapters are consistent throughout every report, so you'll see the same thing over and over. Christine and I started the report in 2017, and like I said earlier, it has really evolved. What set our report apart from any others in the industry was that we picked a theme. So we had themes like creating a great forecast, internal controls, how to produce a winning proposal, AI compliance, and it really does make the report evergreen. Believe it or not, I still pull those copies out from my desk drawer. This year, we'll have the best of, but we're also going to have a theme about winning. And yesterday, our team decided what our new theme slogan was going to be, and it's "In It to Win It." So I'm excited about that.
Mhm.
And I think, Kean, that's something CohnReznick already uses, but it's awesome. Okay, I want to give you a couple of quick stats about our respondents. 46% are C-suite, and we have a very good representation of other managerial positions. We also break the report down by annual revenue. This year we had a nice spread with 52% being SMB and 48% being other than small business. That was an acronym Christine and I learned a year ago. And that was a new one on me. We also capture all the data by the number of employees and NAICS codes. These splits really give us a voice of leadership and a good cross-section of different companies. I want to tell you at the end of the presentation, and I'm putting it out here now, so you'll definitely stay until the end. We have a QR code, and you too can participate in the GAGE survey. So, stay on with us, or even if you get a copy of it later, you can participate, and we've given you the ability to do that through that QR code. All right, Ken, your turn.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's talk about, these kind of benchmarks with optimism and just overall optimism, financial challenges, PM challenges, and RM challenges, right? So, right, optimism is still high over the, go back here. Yeah, so optimism is still high, right? Even if it's lowest in 9 years, mostly due to the political uncertainty of last year. Kim, you alluded to a little bit of all the changes. I think in my career too, it's probably the most volatile year and changing year that I've seen in my 15 plus years, right? What's going on in GovCon. And that's kind of where a lot of the issues started with, all the different terminations and everything that's going on with GovCon. But, it's still optimism, right? So 65% of firms are still expressing confidence right there in the current environment. It really depends on how you look at it, right? I've talked to other CFOs and said, hey, you know what? There's things that are going on with Doge and I want to get out of GovCon, whereas other CFOs are like, hey, you know what? Maybe this is a part of an M&A activity that I can go after, right? So there's a lot of optimism in there and getting opportunities. So definitely not all is doom gloom, as you can see as part of the news and everything else that goes on about there. But there's some real, chances to grow and prosper in this volatile area of this. Secondly, on the financial side, right, 57% of the respondents are saying their biggest challenge is finding new revenue sources. That's definitely, as well as the government's, how they're procuring now is much different than they were last year. Right. So non-traditional contractors, commercial items are some hot topics that are out there right now. So that's kind of where, where do you find your new revenue sources? Are you going to use AI? Are you going to look at, how are you going to use a service to find those opportunities? But the opportunities are out there. I mean, we saw Golden Dome come out recently and all those different AI initiatives that if you can tap into those AI areas, there's definitely a ton of opportunities out there, a ton of growth to go into those sectors. And that's the hot topic. So you kind of need to see where your hot point is for that, and then kind of go after those opportunities as soon as possible and either team with another company or, how that looks like in terms of your business strategy, but always go after those new revenue sources as they come in. Third, we look at the project management side, right? 48% of the firms rank resource management as their top PM challenge. I think this kind of aligns to what we've kind of heard across the market, right? Organizations are trying to become more efficient on there. It's putting pressure on forecasting and staffing and responses. And that's kind of where you can tap into AI. We'll have a little bit of discussion AI later on, but that's maybe where you can kind of bring that into it and kind of understand where to go with the next steps on those challenges there. And then finally, the resource management perspective, right? So 77% of organizations report that budget constraints are limited their ability. That's not new news to anybody. I think that everyone's trying to understand those pain points, with rising cost and even with tighter margins on that, and CMMC coming down, and all the potential costs associated with those type of regulations that are coming up, right? Using AI, how do I make the most money out of it? How much bang out of my buck there? So that's kind of where that helps out with there. So if we're looking at right here, let's dive into a little bit of that 9% a little bit more, right? So firms that self-identified as having more mature resource management practices also found more business development process, right? I think they're less than 10% less likely to struggle with deal flow and pipeline performance than less mature components, right? So if we're looking at that, 45% of GovCon leaders now cite those political environment as top concern. I think that's probably going to, I would imagine for 26, that's going to be the same type of areas. We're going to slowly see a lot of the political environment areas and those concerns we talked about previously. So, making sure that you understand what those different avenues that the government's going to go into and understand what the ramifications are is definitely going to be important for moving forward with that. And then second, firms continue to use sustained pressure on the business development front, winning new challenges like we talked about in the previous slide, and those identifying pipeline performance as the top BD issues. So, while over market is strong, competition hasn't eased. Making sure that you understand those competition is definitely important, and especially with the 8A and the FAR 2.0s and the EAOs and how they're procuring is definitely going to be important to understand. Slide here. So let's talk a little bit about some government contract compliance areas and some of the gauge data for that. So let's talk first about business systems. I think, when we talk about business systems, right, you talk a little bit about accounting, purchasing, estimating, property, EVMS, and MMAS is the 6 business systems that really come out. The main one that you always hear about is the accounting system. Before a lot of cost plus contracts they get, right, they'll come out and do a SF 1408 assignment or pre-award assignment. Those are always the accounting systems, the main focal point of government audits. We have seen, as you can see in the slide too, right, a lot of the ramifications of purchasing and estimating have become more common. I think, when you think about it from a business system perspective, the accounting system is the heartbeat of any organization, and all those other systems are intertwined into that accounting system. So that's why we're seeing a lot more uptick in the purchasing and estimating. 47% of contracts are having the purchasing, and estimating is having the 30% of their, and that's going to continue to climb, I think, with these new bigger awards and those new bigger programs they're coming out with, right? The Golden Dome I mentioned before had all 6 in there as part of the qualifications, maybe at the IDIQ level, but not at the contract level, but it's still in there, right? So you may be subject to it depending on what type of contract and what type of funding value goes into that. So, the overall message here is compliant obligations scale with growth. So as the more you go and the bigger you get, your percentage and more likelihood of accounting systems, estimating and purchasing has gone up significantly over the past year or so. I think, when we talked with clients about, hey, I want to look at my accounting system as a gap assessment, we talked to them about a little bit about that. And more times than not, they come in back and say, hey, let's also do purchasing and estimating since you're in there. So a lot of people are talking about that, and they want to make sure that they're aligning the 3 main objects of the business system, which is the processes, the people, and the technology, and going about what that looks like in terms of their business system strategy, and making sure that they're either going to they want to be approved on that, right? Because approved business systems are not just a kind of a compliance checkbox. They're an advantage to any company that has those type of approvals. and vice versa with that, right? If you have an inadequate system, right, you're gonna have penalties and potentially lost opportunities. Going back to our slides, our 2 slides before is how do I develop new revenue sources, or how do I, win those awards? This is how you do it. You get business system approvals, you get teaming agreements, you get those type of things that add points to your proposals and your scoring sheet to get those big awards. Let's go to the next slide here. So CMMC is definitely a hot topic. So November of 25, they finally released the new FAR rule that says, hey, we're going to start implementing CMMC levels across entire new proposals and such. So when we talk about the levels, I'll go over that a little bit right first, right? So level 1 is your basic cyber hygiene for FCIs, right? 17 practices, self-assessments. Level 2 is your kind of intermediate protection for CUIs. 110 practices, third-party certifications. A lot of the contractors in the GovCon area are going to be the level 2, I would imagine, especially with that CUI designation into there. And then you have your level 3, which is much higher, right? Advanced protection, high risk CUI, more of those areas that the government wants to kind of secure and make sure that they have the good hygiene in terms of cyber, making sure they have data governance plans and their PMPs are up to date on that, right? So that's kind of where the 3 levels are. And as you can see, level 2 is at 31%, and the level 1's at 20%. So that's 51% right there on just the basic areas. And I think that's going to creep up in 26 too. I think that a lot more people have heard the bell and said, hey, I need to get level 2 or higher because that's what the type of awards I'm going after. And it's been evolving ever since for that. So, and even we've been seeing also, even as of last November, contracting officers even the primes are requesting third-party assessments if the contracts are sensitive enough. So, it may look like it's level 1, but the prime or even the contract officer says, no, I need you to have level 2 certification on this. So, which will compound your timelines and how you get certified. And you have to have a level 2. You have to have a certification done by a C3PO, and higher is level 3 is from DCMA. But that all takes time and money and understanding what that level 2 requires for an organization. So the more if you plan on future as going after these bigger awards and they have these CMMC requirements, you want to make sure you're having those head starts on that. I think a lot of that don't know that 30% of the CMMC levels, I think you're going to start seeing pushed more into each one of the levels because they need to. Back to my point before, right? If you're going after bigger awards or your business strategy shows that, then you're going to want to push from the I don't know as, hey, I want to know and I need to know what these levels are that I need to go into. So let's talk a little bit about, compliance itself too. We see all the time whereas policy procedures and those type of areas are the big hitters where other auditors will come into. And as you can see, right, there's an uptick in just about every line item, with PMPs leading the way at 75% and 76% there too. Most firms are relying on traditional methods, but AI-based approaches are starting to grow in terms of producing PMPs or updating PMPs. We see it a lot of time with our clients. The one caveat with that is, right, traditional methods are good, right? You're pulling the regulations, you're mirroring your PMPs. But, when you're using the AI-based approaches, making sure that what they're putting in there is accurate, because we've seen a lot of horror stories where, AI generates something that's completely different than what you intended to be. So again, just a kind of a cautionary tale to make sure that if you use AI as part of that, then make sure that you understand what's going into your PMPs, because that's the first thing, auditors will look for in terms of that. But that's definitely an AI expansion is emerging trend in this area. And then this slide also notes that AI is becoming a tool to improve compliance efficiencies, right? Checks maybe on travel reports or any of those other type of areas that AI expansion can happen, is definitely going to be more beneficial and more streamlined in terms of your approach for compliance. So, organizations can continue to rely on core policy procedure updates, but making sure that the more efficient process is to go after AI. So I would definitely encourage you to do that, but just have that buyers beware as we see in this gauge data now. Let's go to the next slide here. So audit challenges. This is probably my favorite slide, but only because I came from DCAA and I know a lot about these type of areas, right? So the heavy hitters are going to be your most significant audit challenges are your rates, your timekeeping, your business systems. I think that's the ones that they've really come after because it's the easiest to kind of go after and make sure that they have more costs recovered for the government. Rates, right? Whether it's structure, calculation methodology, or even just adequacy of supporting documentation, many organizations still struggle to keep up with this. As you can see, it's 22% of one of the most significant audit challenges. And if you think about it, right, there's different ways they come at it. There's either provisional rates, there's forward pricing if you're subject to that, as well as incur costs. So there's a bunch of avenues to go after to those rates, and that's something that they can kind of pick and choose and where they want to go with the audit, and kind of make sure that what you're saying, that the basis of an indirect rate makes sense, and that's being allocated to the government contracts adequately. That second pain point is timekeeping. Challenges often stem from training, supervision, system controls, and just downstream impact timekeeping errors from across billing and cost reporting. And if you think about it too, right, if you have poor timekeeping or some issues with that also affects your future proposals. So that's why they always kind of go after these timekeeping areas. And I actually have a story whereas I went through a 1408 with a client, and timekeeping was DCA went after timekeeping the whole time, right? They wanted timesheets for everybody. They wanted timesheets areas. So these type of things, they want to make sure that you're accounting for your time on your contracts the adequate way. So making sure that you have those gap assessments, making sure that you have your right trainings and your right methods and your softwares that you're going after for those is important to make sure that there's no findings in the timekeeping area. And then finally, we talked a little bit about before with the business systems area, making sure that you have that audit readiness, I know it's a significant internal effort on that. But as the more you kind of get that initial, approval and then maintain it throughout the years, do those yearly checks will pay off dividends in the long run. So a little bit of effort now helps you in the long run, especially for when it comes to audit time and business systems and that side of it. So, and these other ones, billings, unallowables, CAS compliance, and executive comps, they are all kind of intertwined with the other ones too, but definitely significant areas in there. And it's going to be interesting to see the CAS compliance coming up in the next couple of years with those different CAS realms that they've kind of pushed out from NDAA and those different dollar figures, where that kind of leads to for the most significant audit challenges moving forward. Let's talk about DCAA audits, right? Incur cost submissions, provisional rates, and accounting systems. Kind of back to where our slide, right, counts to 80% of these type of DCAA audits are coming after. I think that's going to continue moving forward as there, because that's where they kind of make their money. Incur cost submissions, provisional rates on a yearly basis, incur cost submissions. That's where they kind of get their final indirect rates and their final costs on contracts. That's kind of where a lot of the question costs they come with there. And then accounting system side of it. So those business systems are definitely going to be continuing to move forward as well as part of, the audit exposure is broadening and, making sure that you're kind of prepared across multiple fronts like we just discussed. Next slide. So this is a nice little slide, right, for your government contractor survival guide, right? These are kind of the purpose of this guide is kind of give companies, a clear, actionable framework for you guys, right? There's immediate actions, there are near-term priorities and long-term strategies, and each one of them have how you need to implement them and making sure that you're understanding where to go and kind of, stop the leaks before they happen. Stay informed is definitely in the past year. I can't imagine how many EO I've read in the past year. Making sure that we understand the ramifications from a compliance perspective, right? Review your contracts, and also not just reviewing your contracts, but also making sure that, you have a good relationship with your contracting officers. I think a lot of things that we've heard from clients, especially in that realm for terminations and what they went on with, especially with the DOGE initiatives in the beginning of the year, was how good do I have a relationship with my contracting officer, and how much can I make a case to say, hey, this is why you need me and part of your program, or why I need to be on these awards. So definitely, making sure you're reviewing your terms and conditions, understanding where your areas are is definitely part of your mission critical items. And then, as we talked about before, operational priorities, understanding your compliance, understanding where you can bring AI into that area to kind of improve your compliance of that. And then finally, just kind of understanding what, you're sustaining your BD efforts, updating your policies, and training your employees. So all these things are laid out so that you can have a starting point on that and move forward on a more consistent basis, and what that looks like for this entire GovCon compliance side of it. So just kind of wrapping up this section, right? So we shifted focus to escalating compliance pressures GovCons had faced in 25. Even with the advancements in tools and kind of awareness around regulatory requirements, many firms are still struggling to keep pace with this kind of landscape of it. But come key insights with this, right? Again, key insights are CMMC confusion persists. Those 30% of those firms, indirect rate audits are our leading challenge of there. The compliance workload is increasing, but definitely can be more efficient with the AI side of that. POMA pressure, increased compliance hours, and AI adoption and compliance is rising definitely in there. So this suggests AI is no longer just an emerging idea, but it's becoming a practical efficiency as part of these areas. All right, Kim, I think I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, every time I muted myself, Ken, I changed your chart, so I'm very sorry about that.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, so the theme for the 2025 report was really project execution and resource management. And this is the U section, the utilization section of the report, and we call it the big U in the report itself. So let's start off talking about what the biggest project management challenges are. So for the last several years, resource management has topped the challenge board. So I think we all know why it's so hard. We've got unpredictable awards. If we get that staff too early, we waste cost. If we wait too long, we have to scramble to deliver. We need those specialized skills. Onboarding takes time, and that qualified talent, it isn't just always available to us. We've got matrix environments where we have different priorities for different projects. Utilization and visibility then becomes very complex because we've got that information siloed. And we have a lack of visibility overall. And that lack of visibility is leading to double booking, underutilization, and that last minute staffing where you might not have the right person on board. So, if we could solve that problem, and by the way, if we could solve that problem, we could probably start to solve the second biggest challenge, which is forecasting. We would have faster proposal times. We would have stronger profit margins, better contract delivery. We'd have a smarter workforce planning abilities, and we would have a real competitive differentiation. Can you imagine if you could tell your customer, we have a centralized, visible talent pool across all of our projects, and we can ramp up in 30 days with pre-cleared qualified staff? I bet that would be absolutely amazing. The one thing over the years, I've been doing this for quite a while now, been in GovCon for a long time, and these top three, resource management, forecasting, and inexperienced project managers have always been those top three challenges. And it's kind of nice. We started to see, lack of visibility into project status would be in the top. Our tools and the AI and the new technology that we have has really started to change that. People can see and get that real-time information with the right type of tools. Okay, so then we asked, hey, what would make things better for resource management? What could we do to enhance that discipline? And they said that the best thing would be to have improved project planning and forecasting. So really being able to understand the breadth of the scope of work and the detailed schedule. Over the years, I did not ever understand really why we could not get the scope of work accurate. But after being on lots of different projects over the years, I do understand. It's very hard to understand exactly what that scope is, especially when you're developing something new, and then to make sure you have the schedule and that you're keeping that schedule up to date. And as those changes are made for the schedule, making sure that you're adjusting your resource plan. The one thing that'll help with that is having a set of centralized tools where everybody can see and there's constant communication around, who's doing what project, and you can look and see what the other needs, and you can actually then, manage your resources as an enterprise. That would be huge. Okay. Let's talk about the project management office. One thing I want to say is in the actual report itself, we did a lot of correlations with the PMO. So as you walk through the report, you have the ability to see the advantages that companies that have a PMO, what they're actually realizing. And I think that's huge. So if you're not familiar with a project management office, just talk about it, what it is. It really is an engine. It's an organization that's the engine behind project delivery. It'll drive the overall governance, standardization, and accountability across the organization. And we broke this out between centralized and decentralized, and let me explain and level set on what those are. So a decentralized PMO, it lives within maybe a different business unit or a program or a division. So it's not at the enterprise level, and it allows flexibility and autonomy for those individual organizations, and practices then can vary. A centralized, on the other hand, is operating at the enterprise level, and it's going to standardize process, tools, and reporting, and it's going to provide overall portfolio oversight. And most importantly, it allows you to align your project's strategy with the overall corporate strategy. So we're seeing a strong shift here towards centralized PMOs. It's not an accident. The centralized PMO, it's not just an operational upgrade, it's a competitive advantage, and it's going to drive consistency, efficiency, and control. We also started to see that SMBs were starting to use something called PMO Lite. It's a great starting point because right now they are twice as likely to not have a PMO. So where you see, the PMO 26, hold on, I can't see this because our pictures are on it, 23%, no PMO. That the majority of those, or half of those, are SMB. So, but I do believe for SMB, it is a real competitive differentiator if you can at least start small, like I said, with a PMO Lite. Okay, then we ask, what were the things that you could use, tactics you could use to improve your project management? The first one was create policies and procedures, just like we saw with Kean's earlier with compliance. People need to keep those policies and procedures up to date. It was amazing when we did the forecasting gauge report, how few people were actually following their policies and procedures and how few people actually had policies and procedures for forecasting overall. I love this, and we'll see it again in a minute. Ditching spreadsheets and automate. When you see the green line, it's 2024, the blue line's 2025. And so we saw more people saying we need to ditch our spreadsheets. And I was very, very happy to see that looking at predictive forecasting using AI. I think that's going to be huge. It's going to make it a whole lot easier for project management and project control staff. That has been always a very difficult activity. Forecasting is, in any help that can be given, especially if it's something that's reliable and intelligent, will be great for all of those project management teams. I love this too. Form a PMO. That's 13%, and change the structure of your existing. So we see 36% of the people understanding that they need to do something with their PMO or form a PMO. So people are starting to understand how important that is. Okay, so we ask what people were using to use for labor forecasting. This was so encouraging. So in 2023, we saw people using spreadsheets 69% of the time, 72% of the time in 2024. And this year it dropped to 58%. That's really great news to me. It sure will make everything easier for the overall enterprise to be able to see a centralized view of their resource management across the portfolio. And then we saw the increase in integrated into timekeeping systems. So that was really great news. We do continue to see, though, very large companies utilizing Excel or spreadsheets. And, there's a place for that. But you still have to be really efficient, you really need to have that centralized place. So, we saw a lot of project managers over the years using a spreadsheet kind of in a silo and not really spreading that out. That needs to change and become more centralized. So again, there's use for the spreadsheets, but it shouldn't be the end all and be all. The other thing we asked were, what were important features in a resource management tool? So if you were going to get one, what did you need? The number one was real-time tracking and availability and allocation. So being able to see that, not a week later, not 4 days later, but real time, something that you could stick your hand on right now and tell whether or not, Kean was available or not. So that's huge. And that's definitely something when you're looking for a resource planning tool that you really need to understand exactly what real-time tracking means to that software company. That real-time tracking then correlates great with having interactive dashboards and reports. So when you're getting that data, that's great. It's all there for you, and you know that you're looking at something where you can affect change immediately. It's not a week later where you've already overrun and you can't do anything about it. The other thing important is integration. So integration with those other modules. Making sure that excuse me, everything is up to date, and that everything is integrated. So your forecasting, timekeeping, payroll, all your project management budgets, all of that information integrated so that you can see it. People thought that's something very important to have. And we're going to have challenges with people still using spreadsheets. It's going to cause issues. Back when we would do some of these resource planning activities, we would be doing it in Excel. We would then take and try to gather that information. By the time we finished getting that information in Excel and then, putting it back together, it was 6 to 8 weeks. That wasn't real time. And that wasn't, that gave us no chance because everything would have changed on that project in that 6 to 8 weeks. So it's really important that you have a way to communicate it and you do it in a very timely way. That will make it more value added. If it's 6 to 8 weeks old, it's just not good for the business, and you're going to give inaccurate information and data to your project managers and your overall enterprise. Okay, this is you, Kean.
Yep. Yeah, so I think this is kind of a good slide to see, right? So 83% of the respondents are saying, hey, you know what, we have some type of project or proposal planning activities aligned with their resource management practices, but there's some real challenges, right? So there's mostly aligning of it, but there's challenges, right? And this is kind of what we've seen across broadly in the market, right? Organizations want planning and resource management to work together, but handoffs, between the BDs and maybe project managers or legal or accounting, right? They're all kind of often fragmented and siloed into their own areas, and then staffing and forecasting and proposal development, often operate on different timelines, right? So that creates a lot of issues with trying to get a compliant proposal out there, or just project managing in terms of the overall, who's coming on project, or how can I plan for the future? All those type of areas, do create a challenge if you're not talking, communication across the entire organization. I had a CFO who was at a dinner with me the one time. He was explaining his process where, like 5 to 6 months outside of the project end, he's talking to his HR person and say, hey, here's the resources we have, or how do we get these people back on project, or do we need to go get more project? And he's planning their revenue areas off of the resource management and all those proposal planning. So that's those collaboration. Even so, you don't normally hear an accounting and HR, right? They're often say, hey, we're going to stay in our own lanes. But those type of the collaborations and those communications is definitely important, to kind of help with these type of areas right here, and kind of, bring those more into the 17% where they're totally aligned and they're connected, and that kind of is streamlined across the entire organization. All right, next slide. All right, so this slide is kind of wrapping up this section, right? Whereas there are challenges that people have with business development, right? So if companies that have more mature resource management capabilities, they have fewer challenges, but indicated by the lower percentage of that, right? Which means by improving your resource management, you should become more successful at building pipeline and winning deals. You'll understand past performance, understand profitability, pursue the right kind of projects or your sweet spots of your projects that you you can operate in. You can hit the scope of work, you can make profit on that, and you'll kind of deploy your resources into their highest and best use based off the skill set, right? So looking into AI solutions, which Kim will talk about next, will help kind of bring that bigger picture into frame, right? You're going to have your growth impact. You're breaking down your silos into there, and these type of BD challenges will kind of be addressed as part of these good resource management practices, and that will help companies grow and kind of provide those proposals and growth that you guys that companies should need and want as part of their business strategies on that. So that's kind of what wrapping this section up would be. So Kim, back over to you.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about AI. This last year, Christine and I decided that we would do an AI supplement. We put the Doge information in the 2025, and so we said we really want to pay attention and do an AI supplement. So you can go out onto the CohnReznick website or the Unanet.com websites, and you can get the AI supplement. We started asking questions back in 2024 about AI, and we saw a huge difference between 2024 and then 2025. So a year ago, it was still emerging. But today, having AI is a new efficiency benchmark in GovCon. So we did see a surge in adoption in 2025. More than half of the GovCons are using AI. That's 54%, and that was up from 33% in 2024. 69% are using AI for BD and marketing, and that's leading the way across all of the departments. Okay. And the laggard right there is finance and accounting. So it's still lagging behind. We can understand that the accounting needs precision and trust. And so that will come later as soon as I think as things smooth out and we see more things happening there. I think the accountants will finally start to trust AI. It takes a while.
And Kim, to add on to that, right? So we've been looking at AI proposal softwares, right? There's a ton of them on the market right now. So I would just kind of give the audience some areas that make sure you try, test them out, understand what goes into them, because there's a lot of, hey, we have this great proposal AI software that you can run your proposals through, give you scores, and sometimes they're not all cracked up to be. But so kind of just give those word of the wise. When anytime you're dealing with AI, make sure you understand what we're putting in there and what they're putting out, and making sure that you understand what that whole process is of these softwares, because you can buy something that may just make things a lot more worse than actually better.
Yeah, and Unanet's proposal AI is
I was going to say that. I was going to say that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. The other thing too is that have PMOs are much more likely to have to use AI, and they're far more or less likely to resist it. And so, I mean, having that PMO really shows a sign of maturity. SMBs are continuing to lag on AI adoption, and that just widens the gap of efficiency. What's really interesting, though, is that the $25 to $50 million revenue companies were the most, they used AI the most. So as they were graduating, made sense. In order for them to be very competitive, they really needed to do something different. And so, they are adopting AI, like I said, the most. And it was in both years, 2024 and 2025. It'll be interesting to see what it looks like this year.
Yeah, definitely.
And Kean did a great job. Having the right tools is an absolute must. So winning and growing is the backbone of the business. We all know that. The win rates overall have been very low, in my opinion. I don't know what you think, Ken, but they're very low, where we see 59% winning less than 50% of the time. So there's a lot of improvement that can be made there. Yep. And really utilizing those dollars to bid on things that you really have a chance to win. And what we did see, another hopeful thing on the upside, was that 59% are using market intel tools to find new deals. And so I think that's huge.
It is.
So it is.
Yeah, I mean, truly,
pinpoint it.
Yeah, these tools nowadays, right? They scour SAM.gov. They go all different areas to provide you more opportunities. That's kind of back to the beginning of our proposal, our presentation today, right? How you can use those AIs to give yourself the opportunities and look into those areas in those cupboards that may or not been, you have not looked in a while. So where can that growth, is it an OTA or is it a grant, even a contract? Right? How can I grow my business, and what the opportunities are out there? So definitely use those tools to your advantage.
Yep. And, GovCons are scrappy. We've been through things over the years, but no matter what, we're still optimistic. And 77% we're anticipating growing in 2026. And
Makes sense.
so
Total sense.
I think that's really great. So all those headwinds that they were facing, there's still a lot of opportunity in the GovCon market space, just like you were saying.
Yep, tons.
So I think that wraps it up, Lindsay, for us. And this is the survey link that we were promising. So, if you can hone in on that and fill the survey out, we would sure appreciate it.
Okay, excellent. If you have any questions for Kim or Kean, please feel free to come on camera, take yourself off mute, pop it in the chat, whatever feels comfortable. I do have a few questions that I can get started here. Are you seeing any move to hybrid PMOs, and what are the benefits?
Yeah, I wish Christine and I were presenting live last year, and we were showing that slide of the centralized and decentralized, and the trend towards centralized. And we had several our customers say that they were moving to a hybrid model, that it was easier. So they would take that, then maybe that big grouping of projects, maybe they were cost plus, maybe they were the largest contract. They would manage that one decentralized, and then their smaller projects they were managing in a centralized way so that they could manage them differently, and then it would be easier. So, Ken, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think just making sure that everyone has those roles and responsibilities and those clear lines. Yeah, the hybrid could definitely work, but making sure that it's very succinct and communication is going to be key, definitely in those hybrid models. So, yeah, Kim, I agree with you on that one.
We were smart this time. So after we were asked that live, it'll be in the 2026. So we'll be asking about hybrid PMOs. And then we did an ebook, and we did talk about hybrid PMOs. So you can go out and look at that. It's out on the unanet.com website.
Okay, perfect. Looking forward to that. Why do you think companies continue to use spreadsheets for labor forecasting?
I'll let you take that one if you'd like.
Yeah, I think the biggest area is just familiarity, right? Like they've used this process for over the years, so they almost want to stay stuck in their ways with that, right? But branching out and using the AIs and using the different areas, it lessens the human error per se, right? Because a lot of times when you have spreadsheets, you're trying to go across the different tabs and different proposal sides of it, which can lead to errors or issues with what is part of the pricing proposals. We've seen it a lot of times, especially with these multi-year, multi-CLIN, multi-ACRIN areas where there's a lot of integrated movement of those forecasts in those type of areas and spreadsheets can be difficult. And I think that's kind of where I'm saying and thinking it's more of just like familiarity. This is how we've always done it. This is how we want to continue to do it, instead of maybe potentially looking into a new AI tool to kind of help you with that. Kim, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
I just have one thing to add. The majority of my career was a finance professional, and consolidating those spreadsheets was very difficult and very error prone. But it was easier for that group, for the project managers and other organizations to use that. I think the tools are now advanced enough, with AI and tools like Unanet, where you can do resource management together and see one centralized view of it. And that's much easier on all the organization, but definitely going to help the finance groups a lot.
Why do companies have such a difficult time with forecasting pipeline?
I'll start with that one, Ken, and then you can. For me, and for in my experience, what was so hard about it was that you had the BD group off doing BD things, talking to customers, trying to use the P wins, but we really didn't have a system in place to track that, so that and be able to then communicate and draw that back into the forecast and adjust our forecast, especially the out years. The instant year was easier, but the out years were harder. And so I think that communication was the main problem. I do think that we now, again, I don't want to go back to tools all the time, but tools in process. We'll go process for you guys, Ken. But that definitely helps, where finance people can actually see and communicate with business development, and they can see what's out there to put into the forecast, and then make sure that that's in, and it's the most updated view of the probability of win for those projects.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Kim. I think that communication is definitely the biggest one, right? Like a lot of times, right, you're always here in that year one type of area where you're getting this big contract and you forget about 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And how does that look like? Do I need to hire 100 people? Do I need to hire, do I need to not hire anybody? Can I do the project itself, right? So those type of areas, if you have tools and processes, right, that's going to make your life a lot easier and be able to project. And maybe you can have a person work on 2 projects because it's the same type of scope, right? But as long as you have that information, it's all about the data and kind of understanding what the process is definitely your keys to victory later on and kind of continue to grow as a company.
Okay, great. That sounds good. Our government contractor chat complimentary Zoom webinar series takes place the third Wednesday of each month, excluding holidays, from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Wednesday, March 18th, we will have Lisa Munt at the Pulse of GovCon presenting BD 360, a new spin on federal sales, the new normal in the federal bid process. To register for this webinar, you can scan the QR code on the screen now. Thank you for your time today. We hope to see you in March.